In the lab, many of you are currently working on, you're dealing with pay. And you have to give answers rounded to 2 decimal places. And so people have been asking me, how do I get answers to 2 decimal places? How do you get answers to 2 decimal places? I need something else.
You justify something, right?
You need 2 commands, cout fixed, which tells it I want a fixed number of decimal places. And then you do set precision 2. And what that will do, from that point on, everything in the program that's a decimal will be printed to 2 decimal places. However, when you do this fixed and you do this set precision 2, it rounds. So if the answer turns out to be 12.569, it's actually going to print 12.57. It will round. And the interesting question that Michael Clark asked me was, he doesn't want to pay his employees that little extra part of a penny there. He wants it to round down. How do you make it round down?
You could have an if statement so that if it's more than, say, half a cent, then it subtracts 1 cent from it.
If what's more than half a cent?
If the total pay, I think in this scenario would be the total pay. The last number is more than 5, but I don't know how.
All right, so how do you do an if statement that checks that last number?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't know either. But that's what you want. You really want to look at this number and say if this number is bigger than 5, subtract 1 from here and then let it round up. That would work, but I'm not sure how you get it to read that number. Chris, did you have an idea? A built-in function? Maybe. I'm not aware of one. Okay. Okay, that's not how I was going to do it. I had a very convoluted way to answer it. So maybe there is a trunk option. Maybe. Here was my way to do it. And like I say, it's pretty convoluted. Let's give this variable a name here. This is a double pay equals 12.569. If I want to round to 2 decimal places, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new variable called double temporary pay. It's the current pay times 100. And I use 100 because I want to round to 2 decimal places. What if I wanted to round to 3 decimal places? I'd use 1,000. All right. So what's the new value of this temp pay? 1256.9. Then I'm going to make it an integer, and then I'm going to say int temp pay 2 equals temp pay. When I take a double like this and I send it to an integer, what does integer do? Integers truncate. So this would now be the number 1256. And then how do I get the real answer that I want for pay? Divide by 100. So I would need to take pay equals temp pay 2 and divide it by 100. But I need to tell it that one of those is a decimal. So I'm going to put a decimal point there and put a semicolon. And now pay will be 1256. So that was my way to do it. And what made me think of that is when Michael asked me that question, he said, well, when I convert to integers, it truncates. And so that was my idea of move the decimal over, then truncate it, converting it to an integer, and then divide it back by the 100.
Do you want us to do it like that, or is it okay?
Oh, no, I don't care if you do it. This is what I expected. But Michael asked that question, and I thought that was a good question, something we hadn't looked at. This set precision always rounds. If you wanted to truncate, how could you do it? And this is a way to do it. Like I say, I think that's a pretty convoluted way. Maybe there's a truncate function built in already. I'm not aware of it, but that would work.
Why is there a decimal after the 100 on the bottom?
Why is there a decimal after the 100? Because temp pay is what kind of variable? Temp pay 2 is what kind of variable?
It is a
It's an integer. So if I didn't have the decimal point here, what's an integer divided by an integer? What kind of answer is the computer going to give me? An integer. So I need to tell it that I don't want an integer. And the way to tell it that I don't want an integer, one of the ways is to put a decimal point right there. Okay.
So when we're writing this code, we don't need dot slash because I thought there's two integers.
Well, right here, again, this is an integer, and without the dot, this is an integer, right? If the computer divides two integers, what kind of answer is it going to give me? An integer. Do I want pay to be an integer? No, I want it to be a decimal. So I need to put the dot there to tell it I want my answer to be a decimal.
Why do we sometimes put the dot in front of the slash?
It doesn't matter where you put it. It doesn't make sense to put a dot here, though, does it? Because this isn't a number. Normally, we've done things like 1 dot divided by 2.
Yeah.
1 slash divided by 2 dot would give you the same thing. You have to tell it one or the other is a decimal if you want it to be a decimal. Doesn't matter which one. I can't put a dot here. I could have written this. I could have written pay equals double temp pay 2 divided by 100 to tell it, all right, now this one's a decimal now. So I had to tell it one of them was a decimal. It was easier to tell it that the 100 was a decimal because all I had to do was put a decimal point there. Could do it either way, though.
Then also when you're multiplying something together, so if you like times 1.5 dot or put it down as a decimal rather than an integer.
Well, if you put 1.5, it's already a decimal. So you wouldn't need another dot.
You got me there.
Other questions? All right, so enough of that. We were discussing for loops the other day, and the day before that, and the day before that, I think. We're about to finish for loops for today. We got 2 more programs to write. Write a program for the following. Basically, I want you to create a multiplication table giving answers for up to 9 by 9. So when we get all done, what should that look like? What does a multiplication table look like? It's a grid. So usually right here we put like a times symbol. And then we go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 this way. And we'll write it to a file, okay. And then we go 0, 1, this way too. Right? And then 0 times 0 is 0, and 0 times 1 is 0. This one's all going to be zeros. This one's not very interesting. And then this one is 1 times 0 is 1, or 0. 1, 2. You know what I'm doing, right? So on and so forth. Oh, we don't need to include the zeros?
It just says positive.
Okay, so we'll leave out the zeros. So we're going to leave out that row and we're going to leave out that column. We're only going to do positive values. All right, so the question is, how do I get that to happen? Wait.
I think you need to give each relation a grid or compare to the whole.
So that would be a lot of variables, wouldn't it?
It would be a long.
So that would be like 9 times 9, 81 variables. I don't want to write 81 variables. I only need 2. Go ahead, Kayla.
You create, right?
We don't know arrays yet. Yes, we will get to arrays That's not the next topic. I think the next topic is functions, and then we do arrays after that. So we will get to arrays. That would be a nice way to do it, would be using a 2x2 array, but we don't know how to do that yet.
Isn't it just the same thing we did earlier in lab on quiz? Yeah. It's just a 4. Instead of less than 4, it's going to be less than 10. And then the other 4 is going to be less than 10. And it's just gonna,
So you're giving away the quiz when half the people haven't seen it? It's very similar to the quiz. All right, so what do we need to do? The problem is, the way I wrote it, we can't write it, can we? I wrote it where I wrote this across, and then I wrote this down, and then I started writing across again. We can't print that way, can we? What's the only way we can print? We go across, we get to an end line. We go across, we get to an end line. We go across, we get to an end line. All right. So, I think printing the first row is pretty easy. What do I print in the first row? I print the times symbol, the X, and then I print 1 to 9. How would you print 1 to 9? I would use a tiny little for loop. Go from 1 to 9 and tell it print the number. And I think it would be nice if we spaced this out nicely so it all came out good. All right, so let's do that first. Let's write a program that prints just the first row. Oops, got to turn the screen back on for that to work. All right, let me just readjust this. There we go. Like that. This program will create a multiplication table. Oops. Include IO stream. IO manip, because we said we were going to do nice fancy spacing. We said we were going to write to a file. So to write to a file, I need to include fstream. Okay. Do I need to include anything else? I don't need CMath because all we're doing is multiplying, right? I don't need, the only other include, we've used a string. I'm not using any string, so I don't need it. All right. Using namespace. std. Void main. All right, so the first thing we said we were going to do is print the first row. So how would you print the first row? Start with 4. I can define the variables right here. Int row equals start at 1 semicolon. We decided we're only doing positives. Row is less than 10. Row plus plus. See out. Row.
Wait, no, we want to do a...
We forgot to say what file we were going to put it to.
All right, so,
Are we putting this onto a file?
well, we said we were going to.
Okay, well then up top we should say which file.
All right, we got to define our file. All right,
So OS.
if off to write, right? OF stream. Print. Okay. What do we want to call it? Data.text. iOS double colon out. All right. So I think I'm going to do both.
But if we're going to do a nullify row,
Well, even the way it is right now, it's going to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all right next to each other, isn't it? I think we said we wanted to do some nice spacing. So yeah, I think. Well, I don't think I need to set precision because these are all integers. Not set precision, but rather set the width. All right. So what do I want to set the width to?
5, 4, 8. I like 4. So now we got 2 4s.
4s. All right, so there's our first row. Unfortunately, that's not correct. Our first row was supposed to have a little X right there. Oops, you can't see under the screen. But it's supposed to have a little X right there. And then print the numbers. All right, so before I do the for loop, see out, and print. So width 4. Keep everything the same. X. And then also print it to the file.
So we're going to run at 9, but let's see what we're making. 12. We should have the set width be a little bit different.
The problem you would have to be careful of is when you write, each row is only 80 characters. So if you set your width too big and you're going all the way up to 12, then your rows might get too long and you're going to get rolled over errors. And so yeah, you might have an issue making a large multiplication table here.
Should we have an end-out here?
Shouldn't we have a what?
End-out.
End line where?
After the row. At the end of the row.
There?
No, it's just at the end of the floor.
At the end of the for loop right here?
No, it'll end line. After like the row after print, like hit enter after print.
Right here?
No, because then it'll do it every time after the.
Right. You don't want the end line here because it'll do an end line after every single number. We want it to print the entire row and then do an end line. So I think we need an end line after this loop right here. So I think we need a C out end line and a print end line right there. All right, well, let's test it so far, see if that prints one nice row for us. X, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, that looks wonderful. All right. Let's check the file. Well, if it worked here, it worked there, right?
That's what you think.
That's what you'd think. If I was clever, I would have had it go to my E drive, so I didn't have to go through all this. But hey, there it is. All right. That's some nice numbers. And an X. All right. What needs to go in our next row? It's going to start with a 1, and then what goes here? 1 times 1 is 1, 2, 3, 4.
When I first brought this up, I thought we were going to have the computer automatically calculate.
Oh, I would like it if the computer calculated it.
That's why I was thinking we would be 89 variables.
No, yeah, 81. 9 times 9 is 81. Plus more, maybe. 89. You said 89. But yeah, I do think I want to calculate it. I don't think I want to tell it. For the second row, print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. For the next row, print 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I think I want the computer to calculate those and print them. I don't think I want to tell it what the answers are.
I originally thought you wanted it to multiply the number at the top of the X coordinate and the number at the Y coordinate, just do that.
I see.
That's what I thought.
All right, so I want it to print a 1, and then I really want it to print this number times that number. And then I want it to print this number times that number. And then this number times that number. Again, I don't want to tell it print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want it to do the math.
Set n equals to 1 and then multiply by count.
Say that again?
You could
So what you're saying is, it sounds like you're saying I need 2 loops. So I'm going to need one loop that figures out what this number is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then I'm going to need another loop to say, take this number, multiply it by that number. Take this number, multiply it by that number. You're exactly right. We need nested for loops here. It's exactly what we need. All right. All right, so for int, I'm going to use row again. Row equals 1. When does row end? Less than 10. Row plus. So this row, this is going to count the numbers going along here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's going to be row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. And that'll be the first number I want to print, right? I want to print this number. All right, so inside this loop, the very first thing I want to do is I don't think I want the other for loop yet. I think the first thing I need to do is print the number 1 and then print the number 2 and then so I want to print the 1 and then I want to print the rest of these numbers. So I think the first thing I need to do is cout set width 4 row. And then I got to print it to my file too. Alright, so this is not great programming because I do have row defined twice. However, this row only lives in this little loop right here, where this row lives in this loop down here. So you're right. I think it would have been better to go up here and do int row and only make it once. That would be better programming. It's a bad idea to use the same variable name twice. Happier? Yeah. All right, so what this is going to do, we're going to print the first line, and then right now it's going to print the number 1, and then we need to tell it to print all the multiplications here. So how do we get it to print all the multiplications? Another for loop. 4. Need a variable. Int. If I use row, I should use column. Column starts at 1. When does column end? Less than 10. Column plus. All right, so notice what I want to do now. Oh, I erased my little... See, I told you I'd do that. Thank you. All right, so this variable going this way is called row, and now I've got a variable going this way called column. So how do I get this number right here? I take row times column. And then how do I get this number? Row times column. And I do that inside my for loop when column changes. So to print this whole entire row, I'm simply going to print row times column, and then have column change, row times column, have column change, row times column, so on and so forth, go all the way across. All right. So inside this for loop, I need to cout and print, except I don't just want row. What did we just say we wanted? Row times column. Row times column. an end line just outside the inner for loop. Why do I want an end line right there? Because when it gets to column equals 9, that should be the end of this row going across. We need to tell it to go to the next row. So I agree with you. I want an end line right there.
Should they lead to like myself better?
I don't know. We'll try one and we'll see how it looks. And if we don't like it, we'll add another one. Try it. Thinking. Do we like it, or do we want an extra end line?
No, I like it.
Well, we'll look at it this way.
Alright, oh, and another end line.
Well, I suppose we should be consistent. If we're going to put extra spaces, we should put an extra one up there too, shouldn't we? All right, so we need one up here.
Should we have the column a little bit left? Should we have that underneath the one so we don't have to see them in place?
What do you mean?
See how every row starts out 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 4, 3, 6.
Right, because this would be, like here would be 5 times 4 is 20. So the 5 should be here. 5 times 1 is 5. That's the way a multiplication table is usually written. All right, so do we like it better with the extra lines in or without the extra lines?
It looks clean.
I was happy with it without the extra lines.
You know what, let's just take away all the separate things.
If I'm going to do it on the screen, I guess I better do it in the file. Whoops. Set widths, we don't like those? Alright. So now it should do it in the file also. Let's check our file. Beautiful. Alright, this is a very, very common technique for building. This would be called a 2x2 grid, or in the very near future, we're going to use something called arrays, and we'll have 2x2 arrays. In math, we don't call them arrays. In math, we call it a matrix. Very, very common technique for building a matrix. You use nested for loops like we just did. Chris?
What would be the file path for like the desktop?
Unfortunately, I have never been able to get this program to write to the desktop. Really, wouldn't lie to you. The only places I've ever been able to get it to write are in the default directory or to a memory stick. I mean, I've tried doing this, C:// try to get the print to the root of the C drive, and it doesn't work. Probably today it'll prove me wrong, and it'll work. But if I go to the C drive, notice that data.txt is not there. I don't know. So the only two places I've ever been able to get it to print are the root, or the default directory where it wants to go, and a memory stick. And if I want to read from a file, I have to put it on a memory stick or in the default directory. I've never been able to get it to read from a different location either, which bugs me because it won't read to that. So anyway, that's frustrating, but that's the way it is. Now we'll write for it. All right. Anyway, as I was saying, in the not too distant future, we're going to get to a structure called arrays. An array, a one-dimensional array, is just a list of things. You can store a bunch of numbers to it, or a bunch of letters to it, or whatever you want to store. This would be an example of a two-dimensional array, where you have a row and a column. In math, we call it a matrix. To deal with two-dimensional arrays, you're always dealing with nested for loops just like this, where you reference the row number and you reference the column number, and that's how you store stuff to it, or that's how you read stuff from it. So eventually we'll be able to build a multiplication table where we actually store all those values, and then we'll be able to ask what's in the memory location that's in row 5, column 6. And it'll be able to tell us, well, 5 times 6 is 30, and it'll be able to access that. So eventually we'll learn how to store these 81 values without having to create 81 variables. We'll create one variable, a 2x2 array, and store it to the array, which is kind of an interesting concept. How much bigger do you think we can make this multiplication table? How many more rows do you think we can add? I don't think we can go to 1 billion.
17 by 17.
17 by 17? I suspect that's probably too big. Let's try 15. I don't know.
Go to what?
14 by 14 fit.
Oh, you could probably check the file. So I think that there's limits within the parameters of how wide.
Well, that is
It's just
good.
a zero.
We don't see that.
Very good. Boom.
Fit a notepad. All right. Seems to me as though 20 should be about the max because 20 times 4 is 80.
But we also have the first one.
But we also have the first one. But this is only going to print up to 19. It won't print the 20th one. It doesn't allow me to grab that and expand it. There it is.
The age-old battle.
I grabbed the wrong one. I'm grabbing that box. Check the file. That's good.
Files still got more room.
Files looks like it has more room.
I have a theory. So the maximum size of an integer is about 2.1 billion. So if you take the square root of 2.1 billion, which is about 46,000, or 46,340-ish, then I think that would go up to that.
And the notepad?
Yeah. Which I think we should definitely do.
How big?
46,000. Reading 46,340.
Wait, we'd have to add a 1 at it. At the end. Less than it.
Well, it's 46,340.
This is your,
Go.
Get on the computer, go. We're at 40. This is how they did the matrix.
It's up to 30,000 already, though.
Oh, that's not bad.
Oh, no, it wasn't.
This is how they did the matrix. You guys do the like numbers on the screen in the movie.
I paused it. If you click on
That's
the...
when there's overlapping numbers.
Right, because the numbers start to overlap because it's only a set width of 4.
That's what I'm telling you. Yeah, look at that. God.
You guys don't think to read the matrix.
I feel like Leo.
Leo?
Leo.
There you go.
Leo. Leo. I meant Leo.
All right, so we'll let that run for a little while.
It's gonna have to run. Wow, what a basic program with just big numbers.
All right, so we don't have time to write this one, but we did something similar to this one before. Write a program to calculate the y values of this, where y is that function. The x values are for the x values between 0.01 and 10 in increments of 0.01. since this will produce almost 1,000 values, and it will run like this over and over and over again, provide a statement to print out the values of x and y for every nth x, for example, every 100th. All right, so we did something similar to that a while ago, where we decided we wanted to print 5 things across and then do a new line and then do a new line. So how would I mean, getting it to print this is very easy, right? That's just a cout statement. And we would do a for loop, for starting at that, ending at that, and going by that much. So one simple for loop telling it to print. But how would I tell it to print every 100th time? I would use a modulus. That's correct. So what I would think I would want in my for loop, I'd have my for loop. I think I would want a count. So up here I would want a count equals 0 maybe. Count plus plus. And then how would I tell it to print on every 100th one? If count modulus 100 equal 0, and then we would do our cout 1 over x minus 4.3 logx plus x to the 4th. All right. Okay. So I think that's what you would have to do for that one. You would have to get it to print every 100th value. You need to keep a count, and every time it gets to a 100, that's when you tell it to print. What if you wanted it to print every 50th value? Change the 100 to a 50. So what does this modulus thing do again? It finds the remainder. So if count is 201, 201 modulus 100 would be, it would be 1. 201 modulus 100, that would be the number 1, because you take 200, you divide 201 divided by 100, you get 2 remainder 1, so that would be a 1, it would not be a 0, it would not print for number 201. There we go. Well, we probably have time to do that if this thing weren't still running.
Can you open up a new program?
So if you go to the system, like, or not system, but the task manager, one of your CPUs would be tab.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
What?
I'm trying to write that down.
We're going to control the middle short.
Oh, pause.
So he's teasing with those.
Check the files.
What did it print in the file?
What's the file? If I try to open the file,
Hey.
yeah, that's not bad. What's the first 9 days?
Yes, your file handle.
I can use something.
But even the file had issues because notice there is a word rat because it's not going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down the end here. So it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How far over did this go? To 255, and then it started to rat. So the biggest we could do on the file is 255. That's no fun. So there is a limitation to how wide a notepad file can be also. Apparently it's about 255 times 4 characters.
Program did this. Well, no, but you don't have times 4 every time because by the time you get to 255, it's taking up 3 space.
Right. But then you're going to have issues down later when it tries to take 255 and multiply it by 100. It's going to be more than 4 characters too. So we can't even go all the way to 255. It would be too big. Yeah. So I don't know how big you could make it, but that's definitely too big.
How big is the text file?
Size-wise?
Yeah. Like, it's just numbers, but it's a lot.
few thousand.
8.8K.
You might want to jettison that soon.
I don't need to jettison it because in 2 hours this computer will automatically reset and automatically wipe that file for me anyway.
Let's make as many as we should try to
Crash.
We're not going to try to crash the computer.
crash the mainframe.
All right, so Thursday. What's happening Thursday? You have a test. What does this test on Thursday cover?
Everything till 4 levels.